UFC 279 is only around the corner, and for a pay-per-view card in September, there really aren't many fights that have been made official for it whatsoever, so I thought, why not build the card myself? I'll be awaiting my check in the mail, Sean Shelby, for doing your job for you. I'm going to become the UFC Matchmaker and do this UFC 279 card builder. I've already got all of the fights that are announced already for that card on the screen right now. We've got Aljamain Sterling versus TJ Dillashaw. That's being finalized for the card. We're just waiting on Aljamain Sterling to finally sign the contract for it. They're going to work out some negotiations there. That's already a big fight on the card. We've got Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Jailton Almeida. That's on the card as well. And we've also got Namajunas versus Danielle Wolf and Hannah Cyphers, who's still somehow in the UFC. I have no idea how, versus some random Mexican female that I don't quite remember the name of, and I'm going to fill in the gaps, starting with a big main event. And when I say big main event, I'm not using those words lightly. I do believe this card is scheduled to have a massive main event, and I believe that main event is going to be Jon Jones, the light heavyweight GOAT of the UFC and MMA in general, and the heavyweight GOAT of the UFC, and maybe MMA in general as well, Stipe Miocic. Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. I'm about to tell you why I believe this matchup is going to be made. So, they wanted to have that fight at the end of July. They were looking to schedule that fight for the end of July. There was a leak of fights that were being made in the UFC sort of headquarters where they had all of the fights up on the wall. And they had Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic targeted for July. And Stipe actually came out and said, I'm not going to be ready until September. September is when I'm looking to come back. And Jon Jones replied on Twitter and said, listen, I wanted to come back sooner than this, but I will wait for Stipe Miocic. I respect him as an opponent, and I want that matchup next. So that sounds like a verbal agreement to me for September. Let's make this fight in Las Vegas. Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic for the interim heavyweight championship. I think this is a huge fight to make. And right now, we're still in a very rare time. If Stipe had beaten Ngannou and defended against him, and then Jones came up, you could undoubtedly say this is champ on champ if Jones kept the belt at light heavyweight as well. But seeing as they both lost their belts, Jones giving it up, Stipe losing to Ngannou, you can still at this point say, and I don't know how much longer you can say this for Stipe's case, you can always say it for Jones's case, you can currently say in the build-up, the greatest light heavyweight of all time versus the greatest heavyweight of all time in the main event of UFC 279, and that is golden for promotion. GOAT on GOAT action. I can already see the promo. UFC 279, Jones versus Miocic, GOAT versus GOAT. I don't know how much longer you can say that about Stipe for. If Ngannou defends a few more times, the conversation changes. If Stipe loses again, the conversation changes for good, I would say. So, while you can say that, GOAT versus GOAT, take advantage of it, make the promo, September main event. And also, you aren't paying Aljamain Sterling pay-per-view shares because Aljo versus Dillashaw is a big fight. You're going to pay him a lot of money. Probably $500K to Aljo, $200,000 to TJ Dillashaw, an extra $100,000 if he wins and gets the belt. Something along those lines, I would imagine. So, while you're not paying them pay-per-view shares and you're not giving Aljamain Sterling a share of the pay-per-view, that'll give you more leverage to work with Jon Jones and Stipe to get them to agree to that fight, because if you're not paying anyone else pay-per-view shares, then you can use that to sort of have a bit more leeway with Jon Jones in the negotiation, who's going to want a lot of money to take this fight. And because you aren't paying anyone else any pay-per-view shares, you can say, okay, Jones, we'll give you 15%. Stipe, I know you're not a champ, we'll give you 5%. And I think that'll be good for both of them. We move on to the feature fight of the card, though. Let's get to the rest of this card. I think we need a good feature fight, a very strong one, where you're paying the fighters a decent amount of money. Not too many legends that you're going to fork out like $400,000 for, or $300,000 for, or $500,000 for. You need some affordable, big names in their division, 2 ranked opponents in the welterweight division. I think you need Stephen Thompson. I think you need Stephen Thompson on the card. And for Stephen Thompson, his opponent, in my opinion, should be, he doesn't want a grappler. You're not going to get the Masvidal matchup. I'm sorry. Masvidal's going to be looking at Burns. He's going to be looking to get himself back up the rankings at welterweight. Or he's going to be looking for a big name coming up from lightweight like Conor McGregor or Who knows, maybe Nate Diaz comes back for a rematch, or like Tony Ferguson wants to come up and challenge him. So I don't think he's really going to be looking for that Wonderboy rematch. He got schooled the first time. And for Wonderboy, a guy who doesn't really want to take on any grapplers. A lot of the up-and-comers at welterweight are grapplers, man. Sean Brady is a grappler coming up. You've got the winner of Shavkat versus Magny, who are also going to try and grapple you as well. If you don't want a grappler and you want to take on someone coming up in the welterweight division, I believe Mikel Pereira is the perfect matchup. Listen to that. Stephen Thompson, Mikel Pereira on UFC 279's feature fight. I think Mikel Pereira, after his last win over Santiago Ponzinibbio, putting himself at number 14 in the rankings at welterweight, has earned himself a position on the feature fight of a main card of a pay-per-view. Give him that spotlight. Against Stephen Thompson, he's going to make it interesting. It's going to be a striking matchup. He's number 14 ranked in the welterweight division. If someone loses above him coming up soon, like a Neil Magny, maybe they'll move below him. If Jeff Neal loses to Vicente Luque, maybe he'll move below him as well. So you could end up seeing, by the time this fight comes around, a Mikel Pereira at number 13 or 12, and a Wonderboy at 7 or 8. That makes sense ranking-wise, in my opinion. Stephen Thompson, Mikel Pereira. There aren't many non-grapplers at welterweight, Wonderboy. You're going to have to work with us here, and you're on a loss streak. So, rightfully so, you should fight the up-and-comer in Mikel Pereira. A striker's matchup. You aren't paying either of them too much, and Mikel Pereira has earned a jump up the rankings. He's put together a good win streak recently, impressively. Moving on to another matchup on the card, which I believe should be Rose Namajunas versus Marina Rodriguez in the strawweight division. This is a big matchup. The only reason I want this on the main card of a pay-per-view is because I know it's not going to go on the prelims. I know it's not going to be the co-main event of a fight night. So, you're left with, for Rose Namajunas versus Marina Rodriguez, main card of a pay-per-view or a fight night main event. And I don't want to see Rose for another 5 rounds. I'll be honest with you guys. I don't want an entire card relying on Rose Namajunas to perform and not just go out there and faint out of range for 5 straight rounds. I think you can afford this to fail on the card because it's not in the feature fight. It's not in the co-main event. It's not a main event of any card whatsoever. Let's just put it in the 4th position on the card and guarantee an amazing matchup with Wonderboy and Mikel Pereira after it, and also give a good matchup before it as well to make sure that it can't really let down a card too far. 3-rounder. I think it will be a good matchup anyway because Marina Rodriguez brings it every time and she will make it a fun fight. And I think Marina Rodriguez has earned herself a title elimination bout in the strawweight division. Winner gets a title shot against maybe the winner of Carla Esparza versus Yang Wei Li in October or something like that. And for Rose, you may be wondering, is she ready to come back in September? Yes, she is. She took 0 damage in her last fight whatsoever. Get back in there and get paid. And you aren't going to pay him too much either because Rose isn't a champion. She won't earn a championship paycheck. You aren't giving her pay-per-view shares. She's still a big name that can bring some pay-per-view buyers to the card. And Marina Rodriguez, you aren't paying her too much either. But Marina's got a win streak. She deserves a title elimination bout. Make that matchup in the strawweight division. Moving on to the opener of the main card, which I believe should be Sean Brady, who also wants a matchup. Wonderboy would be the logical matchup, but Wonderboy is turning down that fight. He doesn't want to take on a grappler, and you can understand why. He's a striker. He doesn't like grappling. He doesn't want to face a grappler. Fair play. Wonderboy can duck a fight at this point in his career. I really don't mind it if he wants to take on a guy like Mikel Pereira instead. So, Sean Brady, we've got Magny Shavkat booked, Jeff Neal Vicente Luque booked, Burns will probably end up fighting Masvidal. Covington isn't fighting number 9 in Sean Brady. He's going to look for a massive name at lightweight or a massive name at welterweight or something like that. So Sean Brady, if you want to fight, there's a guy, and he does want to fight. He's been talking about, I need to come back. I need to get back in there. I just want to fight anyone at this point. And if you want to fight anyone at welterweight, there's a guy who's also looking to come back recently. He looked at a post about Jake Matthews and said, get me back in there. I'm ready to go. I want to fight right now. If you want to fight right now, why not take on Sean Brady instead, a ranked opponent? Because you have earned a ranked opponent, Daniel Rodriguez. He's number 16 or 17 in the welterweight division, just outside the rankings. Has earned a ranked opponent. He arguably should be 6-0 in the UFC. I believe he's 5-1 due to a robbery loss by decision against Nicholas Dalby. So let's make Sean Brady versus Daniel Rodriguez a great matchup in the welterweight division. Get it done now. If they both want to fight, let's just make a fight happen. They're both cheap to pay as well, and I think it'd be a good fight to open up the card. Either a good performance with a grappling by Sean Brady, but I think D-Rod's going to be tough in there, and he's going to make it a fight no matter what, because he's going to be coming back hungry, and he likes to throw leather as well, and he builds as the fight goes on, so there could be an upset later in the third round or something. So, Sean Brady, Daniel Rodriguez, make the matchup happen. They both want to fight. They can't find a fight. Put them against each other. Best case scenario. Moving on to the prelims. The main event of the prelims, in my opinion, should be Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Jailton Almeida. Give Jailton Almeida that spotlight. He probably is going to beat Shamil Abdurakhimov at this point in Shamil's career. We can't know for sure, but I would imagine he's a big favourite over Shamil Abdurakhimov. So, put him as the headliner of the prelims. He's not the biggest of names, but you just want people to see him fight, and it's probably going to be a good performance. You know what I'm saying? So, in the co-main event of the prelims, this is where you pay out a decent amount of money to draw attention to the prelims in general in these two positions. And you also bring eyes to the main event. You don't want to put a guy who's an old-timer that's probably not going to have a title run in him in one of the main event slots of the prelims, because that's where you want to put your future up-and-comer at. I would say Chris Weidman, pay him, and pay Edmen Shahbazyan. That fight is going to draw eyes to the prelims. It's going to be a great matchup. It's a winnable matchup for both of them. When you think about it, Shahbazyan's weakness has been grappling, and Weidman has been chinned a few times in his career. He's coming off of it after a long time off, so maybe Shahbazyan could get a KO. If you want to see Shahbazyan continue at middleweight, you kind of want to know that he's worked on his grappling and he won't be out-grappled. You don't want to have him against a striker and still wonder the same questions about Edmen Shahbazyan moving forward. So, Chris Weidman, Edmen Shahbazyan, they're both coming off losses, and if you're Weidman and you're looking to come back at any point, I think and he wants to come back soon, he's in the gym again training, I'd say do Chris Weidman on the same card as two of his buddies, Aljamain Sterling, a guy who he trains with, and Stephen Thompson, a guy who he trains with as well. They're all like one big family. Aljo, Wonderboy, Weidman on the same card. Make it happen. That's a big fight on the prelims. Another big fight on the prelims that's an interesting fight. Cost effective, doesn't cost you too much whatsoever. Let's put in Mark Madsen versus Mr. Trouble, Gregor Gillespie. Mr. Hard to deal with, Gregor Gillespie. Wants a fight up the rankings or Tony Ferguson. That's been his stance forever. He's been removed from the rankings. He has no negotiation power whatsoever. I wanted to put Gregor Gillespie against a young up-and-comer at lightweight, but I was thinking to myself, you don't want Gregor Gillespie to expose some young up-and-comer and ruin their potential, because Gregor's old. He's probably not going to get towards a title shot, and he's going to be difficult if he does as well. So, you ideally want Gregor Gillespie versus Mark Madsen, two grapplers that are both old, cancel out one of the old guys in the lightweight division, rather than having maybe both of them cancel out some young guys, because I was thinking of maybe doing Gregor Gillespie versus Grant Dawson. I reckon Grant Dawson would lose. So let's do Gregor Gillespie, Mark Madsen, big matchup in the lightweight division, bring some more eyes to the prelims again. You don't have to pay him too much whatsoever. A great matchup, I do believe, to put on that card. And I'd really look forward to it as well. I think it'd be a fun one. Let's move on to the early prelims now. Of course, we got Danielle Wolf versus Norma Jamont here. It's quite costly so far, but you're going to make a lot of money from this card. So you can spend a bit. This is one of the more high-budget cards. This is going to be cheap, Shamil versus Jailton. This is going to be expensive, Weidman versus Shahbazyan. Gillespie versus Madsen, cheap. Jamont versus Danielle Wolf. Danielle Wolf, I think, will get paid 12 for 12. It's her first fight in the UFC, so that's pretty cheap. Some expensive fights here. Not too expensive, but reasonably expensive, I guess. No pay-per-view shares for Aljo, so you're saving all of that pay-per-view revenue to negotiate with Jones and Stipe or profit yourself. So you want to make sure to save some money on the early prelims. So my theme, we've got Hannah Cifers versus random Mexican woman who aren't going to get paid much whatsoever. So my theme is first contract fighters. 12 for 12, 14 for 14, 16 for 16 at a push on these early prelims. No cost whatsoever, but still interest. We open up the card with, I'll start at the beginning, Johan Lainesse versus Andre Lusa. They both lost their debut in the UFC. They're both going to be on 12 for 12. No cost whatsoever, but a fun matchup that you can save money on and still bring interest to the card with. People are going to like that fight as soon as the fight starts, because it's either going to be a first round brutal KO by Johan Lines or like a second or third round TKO finish from Aljamain, who doesn't slow down and works the body well and stays in there and grits down and has a great fight. So that's a great firework matchup to kick off the card with excitement. Johan Lines, Aljamain, cheap as anything. You don't have to pay him anything whatsoever. 12 for 12 each. We move on to another fight that's cheap. Vyacheslav Borshev, 14 for 14 on his contract right now. Cheap fighter to pay. He also has interest in his name. He built up a bit of a following. He's got a cult following from where he's from. So that's going to build up some name value for him. People are going to tune into the early prelims because of it. And you can have him versus Genaro Valdez, who is from the Contender Series as well. Lost his debut in the UFC, but it brings it every time. Had a great fight with Matt Frivola that he got TKO'd in and dropped quite a bit. He's had a lot of time off since then. So get him back in there. He's worth 12 for 12. Borshev's 14 for 14. Nice and cheap. Exciting fight guaranteed. Both strikers that like to throw down. Vyacheslav Borshev, Genaro Valdez. Cheap, fun, exciting matchup. Then we go to the early prelim headliner. You want a prospect who's on a streak, who's got some momentum, who people are looking out for, but also a guy on their first contract in the UFC. That guy is Tatsuro Taira in the flyweight division, in my opinion. He had a big win in his debut. Got a decision win, I believe. Had multiple times where he could have finished it. And also another guy on his first contract in the UFC that's coming off a win as well. And has some level of name value for an early prelim headliner, Francisco Figueiredo. Davison Figueiredo, the flyweight champ's brother, younger brother. He's on his first contract in the UFC. I think he's on something like 16 for 16 now after his last win. Tatsuro Taira is probably on 14 for 14. Cheap, fun matchup. Hype behind Tatsuro Taira. He's got a bit of a following. Figueiredo is a name that's recognizable. Make these matchups happen. Cheap as anything, early prelims. Reasonably expensive prelims that are going to serve a purpose to sort of get people tuning in so that people pay attention to your new prospect in Jailton Almeida in the headliner of the prelims, and a reasonably okay expense of a main card. Good fight here, good fight here, good fight here. Not really paying any of them too much. There's no like 300k paychecks or 400k paychecks like Arlovsky on the main card or Jose Aldo or anyone like that. So good, affordable matchups that are going to bring interest and build name value of. No pay-per-view shares for Aljo. Save some money there. All of your negotiation power with those free pay-per-view shares are going to be used to entice Jones to accept that matchup against Stipe. Great card in my opinion, and I do believe this card would sell probably 700k, I would say. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.